one of the TV shows that Beth and I enjoy watching together is the show This Old House. It's hit its 40th year on TV this year. Last season, they did something a little bit different. They brought in some interns to help with the house that they were building. And the whole point is that they were trying to encourage new people to enter into the building trades. Most of the guys on the show, like Norm Abrams or Tommy Silva, have been on the show all 40 years that it's been on television. The building trades largely look the same. There's not a lot of younger people entering into those fields. They were helping to start a program to help those younger people learn from older, more experienced contractors. They were mentoring them. The more experienced men and women were walking alongside of them to be their example. We need that in our Christian walk as well. We need people to come alongside of us and help us to learn how to navigate life as a follower of Jesus. How do we handle the tough situations that come up? How do we remain a faithful follower of Jesus in a world that is increasingly hostile toward Christianity? One of my professors introduced me to the idea that although mentoring is probably best done face-to-face, it can also be done through reading stories. We learn how to navigate life as a follower of Jesus by reading stories about those who have gone before us. That professor is the one who got me interested in reading what he affectionately referred to as the dead guys. These are men and women who have written about their experiences following Jesus with all the struggles and all the trials that go along with it. And if we pay attention, we can learn from the stories of those people that have gone before us almost as well as we can from somebody that we're speaking to face to face. The author of Hebrews knew that well. He gave his readers a bit of a history lesson, but it was a history lesson with a point. We often call Hebrews chapter 11 the Hall of Faith chapter of the Bible because all of the giants of the Jewish faith are listed there. The author wanted the readers to remember how many people had been a part of their heritage of faith. He wanted them to remember the struggles that these people had been through, and he particularly wanted them to remember the faithfulness of all these people even throughout all of their struggles. In Hebrews chapter 11, the author mentions Abel, Enoch, Noah, Abraham, Sarah, Isaac, Joseph, Moses, the Exodus, and Rahab before he just runs out of room to talk about anybody else. His purpose is not just to tell the stories of these people all over again, but to remind his readers of what these people went through and how they remained faithful throughout all of it. The author was writing to Hebrew Christians who were facing persecution in the first century just for being followers of Jesus. The list of people was meant to encourage them and motivate them to continue on. These people had faced trials and persecutions beyond what most of us will ever experience. Poverty, torture, flogging, and even death by sword. And throughout all of it, they remained faithful. These people went through all of that and they continued to have faith in God. The first verse in Hebrews chapter 11 gives us a definition of what faith is. It says, "Now faith is the assurance of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen." Now, sometimes we get this idea about faith that it's a shot in the dark. That having faith is something of a guess. And that's not the biblical idea of faith at all. The author of Hebrews uses the words assurance and conviction here to speak about faith. Assurance is the Greek word hypostasis, which means something that can be authenticated, the foundation of trust. The word conviction here is the word elenkos, which is the Greek word for proof or presenting evidence for something. Both of these words were legal terms in the first century, something that you could show to be factually true. So the definition of faith in the Bible has nothing to do with guessing or just hoping that maybe one day this might happen. This is the kind of faith and trust in something that we can be sure of. The key here is that these people that are mentioned in Hebrews chapter 11 weren't celebrated as heroes of the faith because they were superhuman or because they were better than anybody else. The people in Hebrews 11 were celebrated as heroes because they had faith in God. That was the only thing that set them apart from anybody else. They were people who had incredible faith in God. They trusted God to lead them where He wanted them to go. They had faith that no matter what, God knew what He was doing, and they followed after Him. They were people who went through hard times, and they didn't always know what was coming for them in their lives. Abraham left the only home that he had ever known in order to follow after God to a place that he didn't even know where he was going yet. In Genesis chapter 12, verse 1, it says, "Now the Lord said to Abram, go from your country and your kindred and your father's house to the land that I will show you." God told Abraham to leave, and he did. The amazing thing is we have no record of any kind of objection or questioning from Abraham at all. He simply trusted in God and he left. That is the kind of faith that we're talking about here. The kind of faith that trusts that God is going to take care of you no matter what. That God has a better plan for your life than you ever could. Beth and I had to learn this the hard way. When I graduated from college, I had just assumed I would get a ministry position right away in my chosen field and that life would be good. Well, I applied to dozens of different churches all across the nation, and the answer was always either that they wanted someone with more experience or that there was one candidate ahead of me in line. Now, needless to say, none of those jobs panned out. Stupid me, this is the point at which I started praying about what God wanted me to do. This is before I learned this lesson. So, I had always assumed I would one day get a graduate degree, but I never thought I would do it right away. When I started to pray about it, I couldn't shake the idea that maybe that's what God wanted me to do. I made a few phone calls, and within the space of an afternoon, after 3 months of searching for a job, I had been accepted to Lincoln Christian Seminary. I had my old job back at the seed company I worked at in Lincoln, and we had a house lined up to go look at to rent. So we made the trip to Lincoln. We did all the necessary paperwork. We really liked the house that we looked at and where it was. The only problem is that we were coming off of my internship, where I had been making $75 a week up until that point. And Addie had been born about 3 months previous to that. So we had a newborn and absolutely nothing in our bank account for rent, deposits, and legal expenses. So we got back home, prayed about it all the way home, and then waiting for us in the mailbox was a letter from Beth's grandma. Inside was a check for exactly the amount we needed for rent and deposit. She had no idea we were even thinking about moving to Lincoln. There was just a short note attached that said, I was praying about you guys, and God said that you needed this. We said, okay, God, we'll go to Lincoln. So most of the time we talk a good game about faith. But when the rubber hits the road, we often want to be in control ourselves. We want to be the one to call the shots. How often do we honestly say, God, lead me where you want me to go, no matter what that means? We're willing to live by faith as long as we don't have to take a pay cut. We're willing to live by faith as long as we don't have to move away from our family. We're willing to live by faith as long as we don't have to do something that makes us uncomfortable. We're willing to live by faith as long as doing so fits in with our plans for our life instead of God's. The problem is that is not what it means to live by faith. Faith that doesn't let God take control is not faith. I had to learn to take a step of faith and trust that God would provide for me, and He has every step of the way. I can tell you half a dozen stories since then of that same kind of provision, that same kind of meeting in my life. And eventually I learned to trust in God first instead of having to wrestle Him for control. Every time I try to take control and do things my way, things end up in a mess. It has taken me several experiences like that to learn to trust in God. The author of Hebrews takes that same idea of faith, that assurance and conviction of what is true, and gives his readers and us a lesson of not giving up and on trusting in God no matter what. In Hebrews chapter 12, verse 1, he says, Therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Now here is a general rule of Bible study for you. If you come across the word therefore in Scripture, pay attention. That means that you have come to the conclusion of a section of Scripture. Now there are a few different Greek words or phrases that are translated that way, but they all basically mean the same thing. For this reason, or as a result, or because of this. And so when you see that, you are about to read the author's point. Everything in that section beforehand, or sometimes the entire letter or book beforehand, was all leading up to what he's about to say. That's where we're at in the book of Hebrews. In this case, the author is looking back to Hebrews chapter 11, to that list of all the folks throughout history who became heroes in faith. These were people who had been through awful struggles and sufferings and yet continued to have faith in God. And the author of Hebrews wanted that to be an example and an inspiration to the Hebrew Christians he was writing to, who were going through their own persecutions and sufferings. Remember, they were facing opposition and persecution from the Roman Empire. In our culture, we are often alarmed to see the erosion of religious freedoms and the lack of tolerance of Christian ideals and values. We might wonder what it's going to be like when all those liberties are gone. How are we going to live as a Christian in a society like that? And what we have to remember is those kinds of liberties were nowhere to be found in the first century. The very world that these people that the author was writing to were living in. They lived under an empire that was hostile toward them, saw them as revolutionaries and troublemakers, all up until Constantine and Licinius legalized officially the Christian religion in 313 AD. So for 300 years, Christians in the church lived in a society that criminalized them for following after Jesus. How did they do it? Well, the key is that they had faith that endured through every hardship. The fact that the church thrived throughout those times of persecution. In those first few hundred years, while they were under persecution, the church thrived and grew exponentially. So how do we do that today? How do we have the kind of faith that endures the hardships of life? How do you keep your faith going strong when you lose your job? How do you continue to have faith when you struggle with chronic or terminal illness? How do you continue to have faith that endures when you lose a loved one? The author of Hebrews uses a metaphor of a race to help us understand how we can do that. He says, "Let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us." When an athlete is about to enter into a race of some kind, they do whatever they can to streamline themselves and make sure that they are unencumbered. Now, a big part of that is making sure they are physically up to the task. They don't want to be the ones that are hindering themselves. In addition to that, runners wear clothing that streamlines their bodies. Bicyclists wear aerodynamic helmets to take advantage of every bit of air resistance that they can shed. Swimmers sometimes will even shave all of their body hair in order to gain any advantage they have in the water. That's commitment right there. Right well. Now these athletes, they do whatever they can to throw off every weight, just as the author of Hebrews tells us to do. That's a Greek word that means something that hinders you or impedes you from doing something. Athletes know they have to get rid of everything that could possibly slow them down and keep them from winning that final prize. Now, Ron Knickrum is scheduled to hit the Appalachian Trail any time now. In fact, he may have started this morning if he is on schedule. So, is that right? Monday morning. He'll hit the trail tomorrow morning. So, he's on his way there now. But if anybody knows anything about throwing off things that hinder you, it would be Ron Knickrum. Backpackers pay a premium for equipment that would maybe only be a few ounces lighter than something else they could buy. They buy ultralight tents and sleeping bags, pots and pans to cook in. They cut the handles off their toothbrushes because it will save a fraction of an ounce. They know that any extra weight that is not absolutely necessary will only slow them down and make their hike more difficult. A few extra ounces isn't a big deal when you're only going out for a few days. But when, like Ron, you are about to hike all 2,181 miles from Georgia to Maine to the Appalachian Trail, every ounce is critical. You can ask Ron all about that in 6 months when he does it back here. The same thing is true of our faith. There are things that can hinder our faith and bring us down to the point where we don't want to continue anymore. The author of Hebrews mentions two things that can slow us down: the weight that encumbers us or slows us down, and sin that so easily entangles us. The weight that encumbers us could be anything that takes your focus away from your faith. It could be a job that you focus on more than your faith. Maybe you focus more on your hobbies than you do on your faith. Maybe what weighs you down and encumbers your faith is worry. Maybe it's financial struggles or struggles with your children. The things that we allow to drag us down and get our attention focused elsewhere is exactly what the author of Hebrews is talking about. Those are the things we have to throw off and get rid of. The sin that clings to us is even more serious than that. This word cling is a word that means something that easily ensnares or something that controls us. This is not something that is easily avoided. This kind of sin besieges us. This kind of sin can infect every aspect of our life if we do not purge it and throw it off. None of us are immune to the sin that ensnares us. The Greek word here has a definite article before the word sin, so it should be the sin that so easily ensnares us. There's no wiggle room here. It's not if you struggle with sin, then you should throw it off. The author knows that every single one of us will struggle with sin, and if we don't win that battle, it will ensnare us and drag us down. It's also important to note that the author says every weight, every sin. The Greek word here means every single one. We tend to cast off the weights and the sins that are easy for us to cast off. But we tend to hold on to the ones that are difficult, and maybe the ones that we don't really want to get rid of. But that's not how this works. If you decide that you don't want to cast off a weight because you want to carry it, or you want to continue in a particular kind of sin because you kind of enjoy it, then don't expect to be able to have a faith that endures through the hardships. Ron could never hike all 2,200 miles of the Appalachian Trail if he tried to take hundreds of pounds of equipment with him. That would hinder him from accomplishing his goal. The same thing is true of us. We cannot have a faith that endures if we continue to let our burdens and our sins drag us down. One of the best ways that we can do that is to have a faith that endures in the midst of suffering and trials, is to look to Jesus. In verse 2 he says, "Looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. Consider him who endured from sinners such hostility against himself, so that you may not grow weary or faint-hearted. In your struggle against sin, you have not yet resisted to the point of shedding your blood." Now the author of Hebrews wanted to remind his audience that they were not suffering through something that no one else had gone through before. They were not suffering through any more than Jesus did on our behalf. In fact, they hadn't even gotten to that point of shedding their blood. Now, he was not trying to minimize the sufferings and trials that these folks were going through. He wanted to put their sufferings and their trials in perspective with the sufferings and trials of Jesus, so that they would be inspired to endure just like Jesus endured. If Jesus was faithful in all that he went through, then we can be faithful in the trials that we go through as well. In light of this, he tells us, "Therefore, lift your drooping hands and strengthen your weak knees and make straight paths for your feet. Strive for peace with everyone and for the holiness without which no one will see the Lord." Have you ever done so much physical work at one time that your arms and your legs just went to jello and you couldn't move anymore? One time I can remember like that. We have a friend that owns some property in Brown County, and there's a lake down there, and oftentimes we'll start a fire up on the dam, we'll sit by the lake in the evening. Well, on one of our visits, we were about to leave for the weekend, and we looked up and we saw smoke coming from on top of the dam. We realized that the wind had caught a spark from the fire we had had the night before and apparently not put out properly, and it had caught in the dry grass that year, the dry year that year. By the time we grabbed some buckets and ran up the hill, the fire had spread to an area about the size of the platform here. So there were 3 of us there that day that were still there. We began running down the dam to the water and bringing 5-gallon buckets of water back up. We doused the fire the best that we could. It took about 2 hours of the 3 of us constantly fighting the flames in order to finally put it out. And we estimated that the 3 of us put about 600 to 800 gallons of water on the hill that day. When we were finally done, we walked down the hill and we just collapsed on the hill. I don't think any of us moved for about a half an hour. Between all the adrenaline and between the physical labor that we had just done, we were just completely physically exhausted. Sometimes the trials and the sufferings that we go through in our lives can wear us out so much that we just feel like we cannot go a step further. We feel like the weights and the burdens of the sin that we carry are just too much, and we can't go on. When our hands droop and our knees are weak, we can't just give up. If the 3 of us had given up that day in putting out the flames, if our goal was not accomplished before we stopped working at it, we would have had a big problem on our hands. Our friend's property is about 200 acres. It's surrounded by Yellowwood State Forest, which is then connected to Hoosier National Forest. Together, all of that is about 225,000 acres of forest. I could have been famous. Or infamous, I don't know. The stakes were too high to give up before the job was done. The stakes in the race that we are in spiritually are much higher. If we give up the race, if we quit before we are done because we are too tired, then we will miss the greatest treasure in all eternity. If we begin to falter, we have to push on. We have to strengthen ourselves, do whatever we can to make our path clear of the obstacles that we face, so that we will not fail to finish the race well. Athletes who enter a race, they have a goal in mind. They want to be the one to win the race. They train and they practice so they can come in first place. Now, thankfully, as followers of Jesus, there's not just one person who can win this race. We are all called to run this race and to finish it well. We can all reach the goal that is set out before us. Hebrews chapter 12, verse 22 says, "But you have come to Mount Zion, and to the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem, and to innumerable angels in festal gathering, and to the assembly of the firstborn who are enrolled in heaven, and to God the judge of all, and the spirits of righteousness made perfect, and to Jesus the mediator of a new covenant, and to the sprinkled blood that speaks a better word than the blood of Abel. Therefore let us be grateful for receiving a kingdom that cannot be shaken, and thus let us offer to God acceptable worship with reverence and awe." Now these verses might be a little confusing at first. What is all this talk about? Mount Zion, what exactly is he talking about here? Well, Zion is the ancient name for the city of Jerusalem. We see it first in 2 Samuel chapter 5, when David conquered the city of Jerusalem and claimed it as the city of David. Later on, that name was used to speak not only of the city of Jerusalem, but also of the temple, of the people of Judah, of the people of God, and of God's dwelling place. Here in Hebrews, he calls it the city of the living God, the heavenly Jerusalem. I want to connect us to two scriptures that will give us a little bit better idea of what he's talking about here. Now, the first we looked at just a couple weeks ago in Hebrews chapter 8, when he quoted Jeremiah when he spoke about the new covenant. He says, "For this is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel in those days, declares the Lord. I will put my law into their minds and write them on their hearts, and I will be their God, and they will be my people. And they shall not teach each one his neighbor, saying to his brother, Know the Lord, for they shall all know me, from the least of them to the greatest. For I will be merciful toward their iniquities, and I will remember their sins no more." This is God's dwelling place that the author of Hebrews is talking about here, where he won't have to be separated from humanity by a curtain in the temple any longer, where he will get to be their God and they will get to be his people in his presence. Mount Zion is God's dwelling place. Revelation 21 gives us a still clearer picture of this idea. It says, "Then I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and the first earth had passed away, and the sea was no more. And I saw the holy city, the new Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, Behold, the dwelling place of God is with man. He will dwell with them, and they will be his people, and God himself will be with them as their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes, and death shall be no more. Neither shall there be mourning, nor crying, nor pain anymore, for the former things have passed away. And he who was seated on the throne said, Behold, I am making all things new." That's our goal, folks. That is what we are striving towards. One day, God is going to recreate this world, and there will be a new Mount Zion, a heavenly Jerusalem that will be the dwelling place of God. And notice that we don't go up to it, to some heavenly place that's kind of ethereal. It comes down to us. God coming down to us to dwell with us for eternity. This new Jerusalem is where we can be with God, and he can be our God. We can be his people for all eternity. That's what we're striving for. That's what we have to look forward to. That is why we have to have a faith that endures no matter what trials or what sufferings take place in this life. Because we have something far greater, far better, far superior waiting for us if we will just continue to have faith in God. The God that we read about in the Bible, he is faithful. He never made a promise that he did not keep. And he promised us this: if we have a faith that endures, we will live with God for all eternity in this new Jerusalem. Keep striving toward that goal. Throw off the weights and the sin that hinder you. Keep up your strength and run the race that is set before you. Finish it well, because the prize is worth it. I can promise you that. We're going to have our worship.